So this is my story. I had been an atheist since I was about 12 years old. Christians avoided me like I was covered in math homework. These Christians, all they have to do is pray to their God and they think they feel better. The real world isn't for the faint of heart. It's a sign. It's not a sign. There's no need to behave irrationally. I'm going to church with or without you. But you should come if you're not too afraid. We announced to the Christians that he was going to talk to the atheists in the crowd. What would an atheist be doing in a church? Oh yeah, I'm in a church. If you're an atheist, here's why. Hey everyone, I'm Brian Michael Kindall, and this is the Save for Later podcast. For my video viewers, you may have noticed that this isn't my usual setup. I'm on the road with my job in the middle of nowhere, Kansas. But I brought all my stuff with me, and hopefully the quality comes through. Today, I want to tell the story of the events surrounding my conversion from atheism to Christianity. Such a conversion story is called a testimony. I've heard a good case made for the fact that all Christians have the same testimony. Once I was a sinner, then God stepped in, and by His grace I was saved. That about captures it. At the same time, though, our stories are how we share with one another the salvation that awaits us all. They're how we share Jesus with the rest of the world. So this is my story. In the 5th chapter of the book of Mark, there's a story about a man who had been possessed by a large group of demons in a Gentile region east of the Sea of Galilee known as the Decapolis. Jesus commanded them to leave the man and enter a large herd of about 2,000 pigs, at which point they drowned themselves in the sea. As Jesus and his disciples were leaving, the now formerly possessed man begged Jesus to let him go with him. Jesus answered, "Go to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. And everyone marveled. Mark 5:19 and 20. Though we do all share the same story of God's saving grace, we're to share our personal stories with one another to perpetuate the story of God's moving through his creation to reconcile it back to himself. A cousin of mine who lives near Boston, she came to know the Lord decades before I had. In fact, she came to the faith about the same time that I had committed myself to atheism. When I decided to give my life to Christ, she was the first person I told. She told me that Christianity has the best marketing plan. Everyone's favorite thing to talk about is themselves. So we'll tell our personal stories and spread the story of God in the process. Whenever I run into someone who knew me before I became a Christian, they always ask me, "What happened? What finally convinced you?" So here's the story of what finally convinced me. I had been an atheist since I was about 12 years old. I used to define myself by my atheism, which for a time had served my needs well as a worldview. I was proudly open about it, and Christians avoided me like I was covered in math homework. I was in sales all my life, most of it in the car business, most of that in finance. There was nothing I wouldn't do or say to make a sale. That's the way the dealerships liked it. In my mind, the only thing bigger than my success was my ego. I jumped out of the car business to join a friend of mine, also an atheist, at his mortgage company. We did many unethical things. All the predatory lending you heard about during that time was true, and we stood at ground zero. Within about a year, though, the housing crash of 2008 happened, and the mortgage company shut its doors immediately. In February of 2012, I was 42. I was estranged from my girlfriend of about 7 years. I'd been bouncing between periods of unemployment and jobs that didn't pay very well ever since the crash. I hadn't gone a day without work since I was in high school. Here, in the wake of the Great Recession, when few were buying, finding a job selling had become difficult. I was working with another friend of mine who was also an atheist at an internet startup that never took off and never paid well. While on my way to work one day, I was pondering where my life had gone wrong. I thought I had life all figured out and was pretty proud of myself while the money was rolling in. Now I was sitting at a stoplight worrying about whether I had enough gas to get to work and back before I got paid the next day. That's when I noticed what I can only remember was some sort of Christian bumper sticker on the car in front of me, maybe even a chrome fish. I don't remember. All that I remember is thinking to myself, these Christians have life so easy. When something is bothering them, all they have to do is pray to their God and they think they feel better. Not me. I was out here actually dealing with the real world. I was the one who had a hard life, but I was dealing with all of it on my own with no help from anyone. The real world isn't for the faint of heart, I thought. That's when the light turned green. I thought the Christian in front of me could have started moving his car more quickly, but he got going before I could honk at him. I was sitting at my computer around lunchtime when my girlfriend, who was also an atheist, called me. The only detail of our conversation that I remember was when she said, "Funny thing, I was thinking about God today." "Interesting," I said. "I kind of was too." She responded, "Shut up. What time was it?" "I don't know. It was on my way in, about 8:30, I guess." "Stop it. That's what time it was for me too." "It's a sign. Maybe we should go to church or something." It's not a sign. It's a coincidence. There's no need to behave irrationally. It's a sign, and I'm going to church with or without you. But you should come if you're not too afraid. I thought her attempt to challenge me was kind of cute, and I was hoping to get back together with her, so I agreed. I wasn't worried. I was far too intelligent for anything that happened in a church to impact me. But I needed it to be on a Saturday. My daughter, who was 12 at the time, and whom I had raised to be an atheist, was living with her mom, who was also an atheist, and coming to my house on Sundays. I can remember how embarrassed I would be if she found out that I was going to church. I asked a coworker who seemed like a Christian if he knew of a church that had a Saturday service. He told me that his church did and that they had a campus over by where I live. So my girlfriend and I set a date to attend Saturday night. Unfortunately, something came up and she couldn't attend. So we moved our plans to the following Saturday. I took a change of clothes with me to work that day to look like I fit in. Slacks, button down, tie. Just before I got off that evening, she canceled again. I had to work or something. I said, "Well, I'm going." I didn't go to all this trouble for nothing. I decided to skip the tie. I didn't want to sell out. As I was turning into the church parking lot, I thought it was kind of odd that it was at the very corner where I sat at the stoplight getting angry at bumper stickers less than 2 weeks earlier. The guy that met me at the door, he was wearing jeans, rolled up sleeves, and Doc Martens. He immediately recognized me as a new guy, probably by my 80s era church attire. He let me know I was a little early and to sit wherever I liked. I wasn't early, I was first. As people started to file in, I saw more jeans, some t-shirts, lots of sneakers, and even though it was February, since I was in Colorado, some wore shorts and flip-flops with their sweatshirts. I was pretty convinced they all noticed the new guy in church clothes in the back row as they came in. They looked at me like I was with the government. I might as well have been wearing a football uniform. A band got on stage. It was like a concert. Not quite my cup of decaf, but I stood with everyone else so I didn't stand out any more than I already did. Then Doc Martin got on the stage and started telling a joke. Probably 10 minutes in or so, he announced to the Christians that he was going to talk to the atheists in the crowd and to talk amongst themselves. I thought to myself, what would an atheist be doing in a church? And then, oh yeah, I'm in a church. He began, "If you're an atheist, here's why. You have no higher authority than yourself." You got that right, I thought. So you never have to be accountable. There's no absolute truth, so you never have to be wrong. You're never really confronted with a good reason not to do anything you want to do, so you can just do it. But you never really have to deal with life. Life just is what it is. I was on board so far, but the irony wasn't missed on me that he was giving the exact same explanation that I had for Christians in my car just 100 yards away from where I was sitting. Then he said, "The reason you're an atheist is because it's easy. You do what you feel benefits you most. You never know charity, sacrifice, and you get to take credit for everything that goes right in your life." So far, I was in complete agreement. I wondered where this little exploration was going. Were they going to run me out of here, I thought. "Being a Christian is hard," he continued. "It's definitely not for the faint of heart." Okay, that was weird. Christians are always being challenged to do what is best for others, regardless of the effect that it may have on us. Rather than keeping everything we earn, we share it with those who have less than us. The reason you're not a Christian is you're not up to it. Suddenly, I felt like I was the only guy in the room. He had been talking directly to me. Could he tell I was an atheist? Could everyone tell I was an atheist? Is that why everyone was looking at me? Are they looking at me now? After surveying the room of about 1,000 people, I felt safe. As I turned back to the speaker, however, I thought to myself, what is exactly why I was an atheist? Now what do I do? The rest of the message was about worldviews, pluralism, relativism, humanism, nihilism, all kinds of isms. I found it all fascinating, but I couldn't help wondering to myself why he was talking about all this in a church. It turned out that it was part 6 of a 17-part series about doubts and questions about the faith. And wouldn't you know it, the topic of part 6, 1,500 Sundays since I had last darkened the door of a church, out of all the cities I could have been in and all the churches I could have wound up in that had Saturday services, at a campus that this pastor only spoke at about once every other month, the Saturday after I had originally planned on going, the topic was atheism. I know, right? I kind of missed the rest of the message because I was just sitting there ruminating about what he had said. What if this is why I chose to be an atheist? What if I had been wrong about God? Been wrong about everything else I thought I knew about life? What if I had this wrong too? He wrapped up the sermon by saying, if you have any questions, feel free to come up and talk to me after the service. Then he read a verse out of the Bible and dismissed everyone. I was a little peeved to learn that there was already a line of people waiting to speak with the pastor at the front of the room. I remember surveying everyone in line, kind of like trying to figure out how long somebody would take in line in front of you at the grocery store. Geez, buddy, do you only shop once a month? So I'm looking at the people. They all seemed about my age or older. This person looks like they know him and just wanted to say hi or something. This lady seemed a little troubled. She may take a while. The pastor was praying with a young couple, probably trying to have a child, I thought. The time in line didn't serve me well. I almost talked myself out of waiting, but before I knew it, it was my turn. I suddenly grew nervous. This reminded me of getting my picture taken with Santa when I was a kid. What was I doing? Nice to meet you. He extended his hand to shake mine. After the shake, he said, if you don't mind my saying so, you seem troubled. Yeah, you could say that, I responded. I wanted to give him the whole stoplight stream of thought, but when I opened my mouth, all that came out was, I think I made a mistake. How do you mean? He asked. He seemed a little worried. I felt like I needed to let him off the hook and let him know I hadn't killed anyone. I thought I had life all figured out, but I think I just got lucky. Now my whole life is a shambles, and I have no idea what to do. I paused, almost as if he would tell me what to do if I left him an opening. But he didn't say anything. He just waited for me to say more. I think I've been wrong about everything in life. I've had good jobs, a decent marriage, a nice house, but now it's all gone. My daughter doesn't like me very much because I don't get along with her mom. Tell me more about your daughter, he said. I couldn't help but feel a little self-conscious about the people in line behind me. Oh, well, I waited. They can wait. He didn't seem bothered. I raised my daughter to be an atheist. I think I made a terrible mistake about everything in life, and I might have taught her all the wrong things about life. She's the same age I was when I became an atheist. She's 12, and I don't have anything to give her. Without missing a beat, Doc Martin said, you do now. I started to well up a bit. I could feel the choking in my throat. Shake it off, I thought. This guy hasn't proven anything. Nothing has changed. He had to move his face to get in front of mine, kind of like checking on me to see if anybody was home. Would you mind if I prayed for you? Sure, I thought. If I was wrong, it would probably do me some good to have the pastor put in a good word for me with the big guy. But he probably told everybody he would pray for them. I figured it was time for goodbye. Just then, he put his hand over my head, palm down. Oh, you mean now I realized. I shifted my stance like I needed to brace myself. Now, there wasn't heat or energy or anything coming off his hand, though I half expected there to be. He seemed careful not to touch me, though. His hand just hovered there. And he said a prayer, It had something to do with me and my daughter, but I really don't remember it much at all. But by the time he opened his eyes, I was in the middle of a full meltdown. I hadn't cried since I was a kid that I can remember, including funerals. And there I was, just straight ugly crying. That's when he pierced the veil and hugged me. I didn't want to be there for too long. I was embarrassed about everything I had told him, the other people in line. I just wanted to get out of there. He held up a finger like he was trying to get the waiter's attention. Garçon, a guy who had been standing off to the side observing the line but not being tasked with any questions, came and guided me out of the line. He must be the crying bouncer, I thought. I followed him to what turned out to be his office. This is where it all happens, I thought. This is where they teach you the secret handshake and hit you up for money. You know what? I'm better now. I'm okay. I'm just going to go. He wiped down the calendar with his finger. What are you doing Tuesday for lunch? I was pretty sure my calendar was clear, but I was searching desperately to come up with something to get out of there. Do you like Thai food? I probably do, but I've never tried it. That settles it. How's 11:30 work for you? I like an early lunch. Sure, I said. I just wanted to get out of there. On Sunday, I had my daughter over, as usual. I remember struggling not to tell her that I'd gone to church the night before. How am I going to explain this one? How do I teach her that I might have been wrong about everything that I'd taught her before? I wasn't wrong yet. I still had a bunch of reasons why this whole thing was nonsense. But it was time to get to work on that stuff. Monday after work, I swung by a library. I started wandering through the faith and spirituality section. I had never been in that section before. There were lots of devotionals with flowers and sunrises on the cover, daily this and weekly that. Calendar books with Hebrew or Greek words for every day of the year. I read the back of one book and put it back. I read the introduction of another book and put it back. It was quite a while before I found the books I was looking for. I can remember settling on Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh McDowell, A Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. He had 3 or 4 case books, but I just took that one. Darwin's Black Box by Michael Behe, and I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist by Norman Geisler and Frank Turek. When I turned around, I noticed a rack of DVD movies behind me. I could use a movie before I get to all this reading. Let's see what they've got here. The first movie I noticed, because the sunshine was coming through a skylight and beaming right on it like a spotlight, was a DVD documentary version of A Case for Christ. I snatched the DVD, returned the book of the same name to the shelf, and checked out. It may be a couple days before I cracked open any of those books, but that night I watched the DVD. It turns out the author, Lee Strobel, had also been an atheist. He was a legal journalist at the Chicago Sun-Times, and out of a necessity to prove his wife wrong, which I could appreciate, he went on a 2-year journey to disprove the existence of Jesus. He wound up discovering that Jesus was an actual historical person whose existence was not really in question. He also learned that he claimed to be the Son of God and was resurrected from the dead with several witnesses. When his 2-year investigation concluded, he said it felt like it would take more faith to remain an atheist than it would to become a Christian. It sounded like the title of one of the books I had checked out. So he became a Christian. Child of God is how he worded it. Today, I believe he's a pastor in Texas. Go figure. All in all, it answered some pretty big questions that I had. On Tuesday morning, I attended a small men's group at the same church I had attended on Saturday. There were only about 20 guys there, and though I was 42, I was easily the youngest guy in the room by about 20 years. Even the leader was 60. The last thing I wanted to do was let any of them know that I'd been an atheist all my life up until a couple of days ago, maybe even still. But that lasted about 5 minutes when the man I sat near asked me, "Which church did you come from?" I kind of had to confess that Saturday's service was the first service I had attended since I was a kid. "Must have worked," another guy said without smiling. Then the leader got up, he said a prayer, and he began his teaching. They were finishing the 3rd chapter of the book of 1 Peter. That was one of the first passages that sort of came together for me and really made sense, especially after what I'd been learning in the documentary. If you'd like a passage to start with, this is as good as any. For Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the Spirit, in which he went and proclaimed to the spirits in the prisons, because they formerly did not obey, when God's patience waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is, 8 persons, were brought safely through water. And baptism, which corresponds to this, now saved you, not as a removal of dirt from the body, but as an appeal to God for a good conscience, through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven and is at the right hand of God with angels, authorities, and powers having been subjected to him. 1 Peter 3:18 through 22. For homework, he wanted us to read chapter 4. I remember needing to be reminded of the assignment. I asked the comedian if we were reading 1 Peter 4 or 2 Peter 4. He was quick to inform me that 2 Peter only had 3 chapters. It's going to be like that, is it? I thought a little angrily, but I couldn't help but be a little impressed and maybe even a little jealous that he knew that. Then he let me know that there was a much larger group of men at the main campus that met every Thursday, mainly men my age and younger. You're in way over your head here, buddy, he must have been thinking. He also recommended that I read the Bible. I laughingly assured him that I would fulfill the homework assignment, and he very seriously advised me that I not stop there, but read the whole thing. I agreed to, but I am sure I didn't actually intend to at the time. At 11:30, I went to lunch with the bouncer from church. He wanted to know what my last 2 days had been like. I told him about the books and the DVD. He enthusiastically approved of all my choices, having read them all, and hadn't realized that A Case for Christ had been made into a documentary. When he asked my opinion, I told him that more than a couple of assumptions I had about God were debunked in the documentary. He told me I'd better prepare for what would be coming when I had read those other books, and he wasn't wrong. Before we finished our lunch, he told me an almost cliche story within the church that I had never heard before, known as the parable of the prodigal son. He said I had reminded him of the younger son. In Luke 15:11 through 31, the parable tells of a younger of 2 brothers who decided to leave home, and he demanded his portion of his father's inheritance to fund his new venture. And he squandered everything on women and loose living. How did the pastor know that I had done all that, I wondered. When he was broke, he returned home, hoping he could work for his father as a servant. But his father gladly welcomed him home with open arms and threw a feast for him. And so the father was God, I had asked. Do you think? He smiled. I asked him what I should do next. Looking back, I really appreciate that he didn't try to engage me in reciting what's called the sinner's prayer. We'll discuss that in another episode. But he said I was on the right path, exploring my doubts. But he warned me that there would come a time when I would have to stop researching what I didn't believe in and start researching what I do believe in. How do I do that, I asked. By reading the Bible, he answered, all of it. So, other than read the Bible, what should I do? I was disappointed that it didn't come with a secret handshake or a quinceañera or something. He said that there would be plenty of time to find answers to all the questions I could come up with. And he also assured me that they all had answers, many of which were in the books I had named. He said probably the first thing I should do was talk to God. I needed to ask to be forgiven for all the sins I had ever committed. And then I needed to tell God that I wanted his son Jesus to be the Lord of my life. What does that mean, I asked. He advised me to ask God to show me what it meant and to read the Bible. Do you need a Bible, he asked. I told him that I felt like I should go pick one up. Then I asked him if he knew where I could go pick one up. After work that day, I swung by the Christian bookstore he recommended. I was overwhelmed immediately upon entering. I saw a big sign on the wall in the back that said Bibles, so I headed in that direction. It got more difficult from there. KJV, NIV, ESV, NLT. I had no idea where to start. Asked an employee to help. She couldn't have been 20 years old. Can I help you? Yeah, I'm looking for a Bible. She didn't respond. She must have thought I was punking her. I've never bought or read one before. I'm just getting started. Can you help? Sure, welcome. How do you feel about Shakespearean English? Not a fan, I responded. She told me that her personal favorite was the NIV. Why is it your favorite? I asked. She said it was pretty easy to understand, and I asked, why was it only pretty easy? She said that it wasn't easy. If I wanted that, I could read a paraphrase, but that isn't inspired. And I said, what's inspired me? She said, well, it tells you what a real Bible says, and it's like reading a novel, but it isn't a Bible. And I said, well, I want a Bible. So she just handed me the NIV and went back to what she was doing. She obviously wasn't getting paid for what I was putting her through. I thanked her and sheepishly walked away. After dinner, I took my new Bible out of the bag. I sat in a chair and opened to the table of contents looking for 1 Peter. Before I turned, I suddenly felt like I had forgotten something. I closed the Bible, I set it next to the computer, walked over to my bed, and I got down on my knees. I really had no idea what to say. I said, hi, God, you don't know me, but my name is Brian. I haven't believed in you my whole life, but I think I might now. I'm not a good person, but I wish I was. I've been wrong about my whole life, and I think I've been wrong about you too. Can you forgive me? I felt silly. I've asked for a sign before, but before I could finish that sentence, my mind flashed to the stoplight, my phone call, the message on atheism, the sunlight on the DVD, my daughter. Okay, I thought, I guess I don't need a sign. I don't want to be a bad person anymore. I've been arguing against you my whole life. I still have some doubts, but I've been carrying those around for years, and so far, they've all turned out to be wrong, like everything else in my life. Okay, you're real, and Jesus is real. What was it that Lee Strobel said? He became a child of God. I want to become a child. I want to become your child. I guess that's it for now. Please help me. Amen. I walked back to the Bible, but instead of opening it, I turned on my computer. I searched for Christian colleges near me, and I found one. They had an appointment the next day, so I claimed it. Then I read chapter 4 of 1 Peter, and I called my cousin in Boston for the first time in 30 years. We were on the phone until 3 o'clock, my time. It was 5 for her. When I sat across from the lady at the college, I was struck by how much her office looked like mine looked at my last job as a finance manager in the car business. Computer, printer, cabinet. How can I help you? She said. I'm interested in going to college here. Great. What would you like to take? I don't know. What do you got? Well, a lot. What are your interests? The Bible. What's your favorite book? I don't know yet. Ah, she said, tuning into my frequency. How long have you been a Christian? Not quite a week, technically not quite 24 hours. She spun around in her chair. She opened a drawer in her filing cabinet. She pulled out a flyer and she laid it in front of me. This is our biblical studies program. She walked me through everything, curriculum, financial aid, and I was ready to rock. When do I start? August. August? Why so long? That's when classes start. What am I supposed to do in the meantime? Read your Bible. Yeah, okay, I've been getting a lot of that lately. I stood up to leave. I shook her hand, and I said, this job is almost exactly like a job I did in the car business. We're hiring, she said. Shut up. No way. She recommended I fill out an application on the website. So when I got home, I completed the application, and I thought they won't hire me. I'm not one of them. I returned to my church's website looking for someplace I could get some basic information. Where do I go for the secret handshake? Christianity 101. Perfect. Average age, 6 years old. Awana, through the 8th grade. Wait a minute. Everyone in that line was my age. Where were we supposed to plug in, I wondered. Maybe that's why everyone kept telling me to read the Bible. But I wanted a place to plug in. Thursday morning, I attended that larger men's group I was told about. If you'd like to hear about what happened there, I talk all about it in my first episode. I'll put a link to it in the description down below. After that, I read those other books. My work schedule accommodated my need to read so much. It was March. It would be about July before I was finally convinced I needed to read the Bible. And that's a good story, but it's a story for another time. Looking back, I've consumed more information in the last 13 years than in the 42 years that preceded it. Funny thing, all those questions I had were answered. What must have been 3 months or so later, I was called back to interview at that college, and I was hired to be an enrollment counselor. And guess what my chief responsibility was? The biblical studies program. I know, right? So I started my first class in August and started my new job in October. And it wasn't until November that I even realized that free tuition was a benefit of the job. I had to get my money back for the class I had already paid for. It was Christmas of that same year before I completed my first reading of the Bible. I'll be honest, that first reading went right over my head for the most part, so I read it again. And the more I read Scripture, the more it has become a part of me. So once I was a sinner, and then God stepped in, and by His grace, I was saved. And that about captures it. If you're playing along at home, you may have noticed that no one shared the gospel with me at work. No one invited me to church, unless you count my girlfriend who dared me. Though the program that God has set up for His members of His church is to share the good news with the world and attract them to the church. When they miss the chance for whatever reason, God will pick up the slack. A friend of mine reminded me that when there are people praying for me, that often has an impact. That made me think of my mother. She told me that she prayed for me every day. She takes full credit for my salvation, and that's okay. What I do know is that I had nothing to do with it. I fought it kicking and screaming, but God got His way. In other words, the bumper sticker at the stoplight, the ex-girlfriend, long story, the church next to the stoplight, and the message on atheism, the only message that probably could have possibly gotten my attention on all the Sundays and all the churches on a week I wasn't supposed to go, the DVD, the books, the college with the new job and the free tuition. These were either a sudden tide of coincidences like I never experienced before or since, or the Holy Spirit shook me by the throat until I got the message. And I got the message, and I want to share it with everyone and let everyone know how it impacted my life. For one, I've come to believe in coincidences a lot less. 6 years later, my daughter was baptized, so I wrote an article about it, and that's another good story. I prayed for her every day, and I'd like to take full credit for her salvation, but I know better. Let me share another cliche with you. Funny thing about cliches is they tend to be true and applicable. Sometimes you don't realize that God is all you need until God is all you have. He stripped me of the money, the pride, and the ego, and He eliminated all distractions until I couldn't help but see Him. Have you seen Him? Let me know in the comments below. None of my atheist friends talked to me anymore, so I made new friends, better friends. Today I'm a Christian, praise God. I've still got a long way to go. I still struggle with pride and ego. I've been made into something very different from who I was in 2012. I'm a new creation. And with God's help, the work continues. That's a process called sanctification, and we'll talk about that at another time. Now, I blog and I podcast to those who have become seekers or believers in their adulthood later in life and have difficulty finding answers like I did to difficult questions from people who grew up in the church. I want to provide a place to plug in that I couldn't find. If you'd like to be a part, you can subscribe and follow me here. So what comes next? Read the Bible, all of it. But there's actually a more effective way and a less effective way to do that. I've done both, and we'll discuss all that in another episode. If you found this content helpful, please pass it along to someone that may benefit from it. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment below, and that will help push the algorithm so that the podcast is shown and others can see it. You can follow me on YouTube, Rumble, or anywhere that you can listen to a podcast, and you can also visit my blog at savedforlater.org. Until next time, this is Brian Michael Kindall with the Save for Later podcast, reminding you to read the Bible and have a great day.